Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ruminate This with Agrarian Solutions. Join us as we explore ruminant nutrition and the impact of mycotoxins. Here, we challenge your curiosity and explore new industry insights and research to optimize your herd's health and performance. All right. Hey, welcome, everybody, to another episode of Ruminate This with Agrarian Solutions. I'm your host, Scott Zaire. And today we are going to be talking with Dr. Larry Roth once again. So, Larry, thank you for taking time out of your day today. And today's call, we are going to dive a little deeper into the DTX enhancement that we shared with the rest of the world back there in January in episode 33, the Next Generation of DTX, which dropped on January 20th. And when I say dive a little deeper, I give a lot of credit to Dr. Roth and the leadership here at Agrarian, identifying such a strategic relationship with our source of LivOx. And there's a reason we wanted to move forward with this enhancement. I mean, there's a reason we wanted to make DTX, which was already really, in my opinion, and according to certain research, Larry, the best mycotoxin mitigation product on the market. And it's not very often we get to make the best better. And so just to give folks a little more of an insight as to what this enhancement means and what LivOx can potentially do for our cattle, I have Dr. Roth in here, and we're going to dive into the data behind LivOx. And I'll just let people know up front, some of this stuff, just the first time I saw it, my mouth dropped open and it was like, wow, this is impressive. So this is going to be more of a slideshow thing. So for those of you listening on a traditional podcast platform, Spotify or Apple Podcast, you can jump over to YouTube to watch the video slideshow. And also you can email us podcast@agrsol.com, and we can also get you the information that way. So Dr. Roth, anything you want to say before we jump into it?
No, Scott, I just appreciate this opportunity to unveil more of the research. There's so much research behind this. And, we had to make a decision to strategically release the research behind it, because otherwise it's like drinking from a fire hose. And there's a lot of this that I just sit there and go through it, and this is mind bending. And so
I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah, I'm a geek enough that, man, if you were to just start laying all of this out there, people's minds would glaze over, I think. So we want to strategically bring this out.
I'll be honest, Larry, when you dropped the bomb to me of Carnosic acid in the research there, my mind was bent. It was, I give you guys a lot of credit there. So yeah, whenever you're ready, Larry, let's dive right in.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, so let's jump into this PowerPoint presentation here, defending and protecting dairy cattle. My bias as a nutritionist is that the digestive tract is the most important part of the animal. So often we put an emphasis on absorbing nutrients, and certainly that is important, but perhaps equally as important is the role of the digestive tract for protecting the rest of the body, keeping the barbarians, keeping the bad stuff in the digestive tract and not allowing it into the body. So let's talk today about how we're going to further defend and protect digestive tract integrity and how we're going to defend and protect the liver. So one of my favorite little cartoon drawings looking at defending and protecting the digestive tract. Scott, we start over here on the left with relatively healthy epithelial cells responsible for absorbing nutrients, but again, serving that castle wall. And in between, we have the tight junctions, and they're supposed to be tight. Because if we lose those tight junctions, we've got what I like to refer to as the interstate highway for bad stuff to drive right into the body. In the past, we have focused on the role of the lactoform bacteria for activating the transport protein systems that kick mycotoxins out of the cell. And this little guy right here shows what happens if we don't have the lactoform bacteria. If we're not cleaning up the cells, then the mycotoxins are able to get into the cell, cause it to die, split it open, and that's another avenue for mycotoxins, pathogens, and just other digestive components to get into the body to cause an inflammation load. So let's think about this. Tissues in the gut lining and liver require a lot of nutrients to repair themselves. There's already a tremendous nutrient load from turnover, but then we have to repair the cells because of damage. That's extra nutrients that are required. So the dairy producer, beef producer is already paying for the nutrients. Then if we lose digestive tract integrity, those nutrients aren't going to productive purposes. They're going back to just trying to stay alive. So,
And Larry, what you're talking about here is what we would refer to commonly as leaky gut, right?
You bet. Leaky gut.
Yeah.
And what can we do to have nutrient allocation go as it's supposed to, the most productive purposes? So let's think of the immune system, the body's military. It needs glucose to operate. And the cow needs glucose to make milk. No glucose, no lactose, no milk. Glucose is also needed as a carbon source for rapidly developing cells, such as oocytes to become eggs, to become embryos. So the immune system is functioning at a high level. It's going to need a lot of glucose and other nutrients. So we want to prevent leaky gut, and we want proper nutrient allocation. We've talked in the past about DTX modes of action. We've always been talking about defend digestive tract integrity for reasons we just mentioned. We want to protect against mycotoxin related inflammation, help nutrients go where they're supposed to. And we talk about the liver being so important as the body's biochemical factory, responsible for detoxification as well as nutrient transformation. It all comes back to nutrient allocation. In the past, we have talked about the research study that we showed that DTX will improve both milk production and reproductive performance. And you've seen this slide before where we talk about the conclusions, 2.5 pounds of milk per cow per day for multiple lactation cows during the first 150 days. And then for all cows, improving preg rates measured as pregnancies per service from both AI and ET. So Scott, that's lactoform by itself. That's what we have today in DTX. But now what we're going to do is enhance what we've already done.
Yeah, so Larry, just to jump in on that last slide, that to me is a slide that probably, I know we talk about it a lot, but you want to talk about mind-bending research, like we were talking about at the beginning of this podcast. Show me another mycotoxin mitigation product on the marketplace that has this kind of research.
Mm-hmm. Yep. 920 cows.
Yep.
So good research. But let's talk about the future. So we want to keep lactoform, the cell wall deficient bacteria there, but we brought in the proprietary blend of natural plant actives that we call LivOx, liver oxidative support. So talk about digestive tract integrity. Go back to that first cartoon drawing that I showed you. We want to protect liver health. So we have a partner that has 30 years of experience with the plant molecules. So we're moving beyond plant extracts, the essential oils, the flavors. We're getting down to the individual plant molecules that actually provide the benefits that we're after. What's the benefits of that? We don't need to put in as much dry matter because we've got the actual molecules. We don't need everything else. And when we understand how these plant molecules work, we can go get the actual molecules that we want for this specific purpose. Now, the neat part of this is Agrarian has exclusive U.S. rights to this technology. So, turmeric. Turmeric is a member of the ginger family. You see ginger root there. Naringenin, that's the plant extract that comes from citrus peels. So we're using turmeric and naringenin to support digestive tract integrity. And then we have rosemary to protect not just liver tissues, but other tissues in the body as well. I would rather talk about the plant actives, curcumin and naringenin. Let's talk about what they do and look at some of the research. Carnosic acid, a very powerful antioxidant. We'll show some of that research in greater depth. So here's a molecule of curcumin in the upper right-hand corner. Curcumin defends the tight junctions by strengthening the protein structure. We'll look at that in more depth on the next slide. It all comes back to protecting intestinal epithelial integrity. So you've got the lactiform bacteria to protect against this happening. So we have the good, healthy cell. Good, healthy cell, but look here. We've got open, tight junctions, not with curcumin around. Curcumin is going to enter the epithelial cell and is going to strengthen those tight junctions. Well, sort of. You see, curcumin is very poorly absorbed. Curcumin gets into the cells through passive influx. In other words, not the active transport proteins that a large molecule, such as a mycotoxin, would require, or lysine, an amino acid. The curcumin is a much smaller molecule than the mycotoxin. So curcumin is able to go in passively. But there's some challenges getting the curcumin molecule into the cell. So that's where we need naringenin to come into play to improve the curcumin passive entry into the cell. So you're going to see competitors who have curcumin on their label, or more accurately, they're probably going to have turmeric because they haven't gone all the way down to refining to the point of curcumin. Very, very few are using naringenin. Great, you got turmeric, but are you down to the curcumin level? Great, you're down to the curcumin level, but have you brought in naringenin to increase the passive absorption of the curcumin molecule? So here's a little bit more intense look at the epithelial cells. We see the tight junctions represented in blue and in red that actually hold these cells together so that we don't have the opening between the epithelial cells for bad stuff to get into the body or things that we want to have in the body going back into the digestive tract, for example, causing scours or diarrhea. So we've got our proteins here that constitute the tight junctions to hold everything together. What we got to do is get curcumin into the epithelial cells to help strengthen the protein chains that constitute the tight junctions to hold everything together. Now, here's where we get into some interesting research. Again, we talk about things that are very intense. This is in vitro work, and they use these CACO2 cells. What is that? That stands for carcinoma cancer colon cells. These are cells that are grown in the lab specifically to look at intestinal permeability. These CACO2 cells are used in pharmacological studies to look at the ability of pharmaceuticals to be absorbed into the body and what is the ability of the body to secrete these pharmaceuticals back into the digestive tract. And if we look at the ability to absorb and the ability for the pharmaceutical or whatever molecule to go back into the digestive tract, we start to understand something about how they are absorbed. So the CACO2 cells are commonly used in pharmaceutical type studies. So very well accepted by the pharmaceutical community and accepted by researchers who study what's happening at the small intestine level. Kind of new to us here on the animal nutrition side, but we're using the CACO2 cells as an experimental intestinal epithelial barrier to see what happens. So here inside the circle, we have labeled apical. That is representing the area where the small intestine contents would be. Curcumin can be presented in both the apical cell side and in the basolateral side. The basolateral side of the epithelial cells represents the body. Then you have in the middle the epithelial barrier, here the CACO2 cells. So I'm going to show you the results of two experiments. In experiment number one, curcumin is put in the apical side, all right? And we're going to look at what is the ability curcumin to enter the epithelial cells, because we have to have curcumin getting into the epithelial cells to strengthen the tight junction proteins. And then we're going to look at an experiment where we put the curcumin basolateral, like the curcumin is in the body, but what is the permeability of the epithelial cells for curcumin to get back into the digestive tract? And if that is high, then we've got probably passive immunity. So we're going to look at two different studies, and the way that the researchers presented it was they put them together on the same graph, and that's how I'm going to present it. So having said all that, here we got our curcumin molecule. That's what's going to enter the epithelial cells by a passive process, passive absorption, and then also has the opportunity to go back into the body. So we're talking about relative total curcumin concentration in the apical, which is going to be in the digestive tract. Let's think of it that way. And then we also have basolateral, represented here on the right side. That would be curcumin concentration in the body. Think of it that way. And then intestinal cells, that's the curcumin that gets into the actual epithelial cells. So I said we're looking at two different experiments. The first experiment we're going to look at is over here represented on the two left columns, and that is where curcumin is put on the basolateral side. Okay, so we're like putting curcumin over here on this side of the epithelial cells that represents the body. The gray column represents curcumin by itself. The green column represents when curcumin and naringenin together are put basolateral. So at this point, don't pay attention to the basolateral here, but we're just putting the curcumin and naringenin inside the body, and we're looking at what is the ability of curcumin to passively go into the epithelial cells and then passively go into, shall we say, the intestinal contents. Look here. When you have curcumin and naringenin together, the relative curcumin concentration is greatly increased in, shall we say, the intestinal contents. So that indicates that it's a passive process for curcumin to go from the cells back into the body, and we have the increase here. So naringenin helps curcumin to be both absorbed and go back into the body. Passive process. Let's go over here to the right side. This is basolateral. So in this part of the experiment, the curcumin is put into the apical side, the intestinal side, and now we're evaluating the ability of the curcumin to enter the epithelial cells, the intestinal cells, and go all the way to being in the body, the basolateral. So what these two columns here on the right say, that when you have curcumin and naringenin together, you have more of the curcumin going all the way into the body, because the green column is higher than the gray column, where it's just curcumin by itself. So that part of the experiment says Putting Naringenin and Curcumin together, you increase the ability of curcumin to get into the epithelial cell passively and go all the way into the body. Okay, that's important. But what we're really wanting to do is get curcumin into the intestinal cells. So the two columns here in the middle, and this is based upon relative curcumin concentration. So we're taking the results of both the experiment on the left and the experiment on the right, put them together, and it says that when you have curcumin and Naringenin together, we get more curcumin into the intestinal cells.
I mean, it pretty much doubles the bioavailability right across the board, maybe even a little more than doubles.
You bet. Yep. So passive absorption, you got to have Naringenin for curcumin to be absorbed. Otherwise, we don't get it into the cells. And Scott, let's make this study available for everybody to look at because it is kind of complicated. And the researchers in the article do a better job of explaining all of this. But they make the point that if you're administering curcumin orally, like if you were a human taking a curcumin tablet, or you were feeding curcumin to an animal, a dairy cow, it's not going to get absorbed. It's very poorly absorbed. But what this study says is if you have Naringenin combined with the curcumin, you greatly increase the curcumin concentration in the intestinal cells. You just
Larry,
increase the ability of curcumin to move back and forth.
you mentioned that you might find other stuff in the marketplace that's using curcumin, right? And it's on the label, it's there. They might be talking about it. And just as an educational, I guess, piece of this conversation, if you're listening to this, don't be afraid to challenge and say, hey, what's the real deal here? Is it, there's a term that gets used a lot in the feed additive world called window dressing. And unfortunately, when you look at this study, yeah, if we were putting curcumin in DTX, but not Naringenin, I would say that's called window dressing.
Exactly. You're not getting the true benefits of curcumin.
So, Larry, that's a great point on the curcumin and Naringenin conversation. And to me, this is really exciting stuff. It really demonstrates, I think, integrity on our part that we're not going to just throw some stuff in there for a soundbite or whatever. Like, we're going to actually make this work. But this is only about half of the story so far, right?
Yep.
So we're going to dive into the carnosic acid side of things. And just as a reminder, we will make this presentation available to you. There will be a link in our show notes, and you can always email podcast@agrsol.com for some one-on-one consultation. Larry, tell us about carnosic acid.
All right. Excellent. So carnosic acid, fat-soluble antioxidant, important for protecting liver and other tissues. And here we have the carnosic acid molecule. So protect the liver so that we get detoxification of any mycotoxins that might get through, or also protect the liver so that we can have proper nutrient metabolism. So a very interesting study that came from South Dakota State University. And let me just take a moment here to set up the study. The carnosic acid was IV'd into transition dairy cows from day 1 to day 3 of calving, after calving. So it's important, day 1 to day 3, because I'm going to show you some research that goes out 3 weeks. So why did they IV carnosic acid? They wanted to know exactly how much carnosic acid was going into the cow. Now, carnosic acid is absorbed, so we can feed it to the cow, but they were wanting to specifically know how much carnosic was going into the animal. So they had daily intravenous infusion, and you can see the rate for carnosic acid, 0.3 milligrams per kilogram. What does that mean? For a 1,500-pound cow, that would be about 0.2 gram. We are IVing for just 3 days. Scott, here's some dramatic results. This is energy-corrected milk. They saw improvements in milk production, but I'm wanting to show you energy-corrected milk. A treatment difference of 0.08 p-value. Remember that it was only 8 cows each way. And look at this, week 1, week 2, week 3. Remember, on the previous slide, I said the carnosic acid was only administered the first 3 days. So this is after carnosic acid was stopped, after it was stopped, after 3 weeks after it was stopped.
Yeah,
Showing the importance
this is incredible.
of early protection of the liver. There's lasting impacts. Now, from an immune standpoint, they measured haptoglobin at different days, but during the administration of carnosic acid, haptoglobin was reduced, which means inflammation was reduced. So what we're talking about here is carnosic acid providing antioxidant support the first 3 days after calving, having long-term benefits from protecting the liver. And I'm going to suggest there may be some benefits to carnosic acid for protecting other tissues as well. And if we do that, we have fewer of the free radicals or reactive oxidative species attacking other cells and attacking the liver. But the critical importance of the first 3 days, dramatic. So here's energy-corrected milk, a in benefit, but other immune markers were measured that showed that during carnosic acid administration, inflammation was reduced. So, Scott, again, this article is going to be available for viewers to get into because, again, there's some really neat stuff here. But I wanted to give kind of a high-level view of the curcumin and the Naringenin, why it's important to supplement them together, and the importance of carnosic acid. So synergistic
Larry, just
technology. Yes.
Larry, on that slide here, I mean, we're talking week 1, right? So 39, let's call it 39 kilograms of milk versus 46 kilograms of milk.
Yeah.
And if you do the math on that, that's 15 pounds of milk. That's a big difference, at that week 1. And then you look at, what, 46 to 56, 57. I mean, that's a lot of milk.
It shows the importance of antioxidant support to the liver during the challenging 3 days after calving.
Yeah.
Now, just think if they had been able to provide Carnosic pre-fresh for their antioxidant support, or if they had done it even after those critical 3 days. So Scott, what we've looked at here, synergistic technologies. You got the lactoform to protect the intestinal epithelial tissues. That's good. Now you got curcumin and Naringenin working together to defend the tight junctions. Curcumin supports the tight junction proteins. Naringenin improves the passive absorption of the curcumin. And then carnosic acid for antioxidant protection of the liver and other cells. You got 4 components working together here. Wow. I'm excited about this, Scott. It's all about staying on the cutting edge of what we can do to defend and protect the animal. Defend and protect digestive tract integrity, defend and protect liver health.
I come back to, if you go to any of the nutrition conferences over the last 3 years, the amount of conversations from folks like Lance Baumgard, right, talking about inflammation. Larry, it's practically a buzzword. We've talked about it so much, and it should be, right? We know a lot more now about, kind of bad inflammation and what it's doing to our animals. And mycotoxin surely plays a part in that, in causing inflammation, systemic inflammation that's robbing our cows of health and reproductive success and production. Hats off to you and the rest of the team that was able to put this together, because this is, in my mind, the next frontier of where these nutrition industry conversations are headed over the next number of years, doing the battle with inflammation. And this is a big part of that. And if you don't have liver health to go along with it, it's just such a nutrient drain.
Now, Scott, you're talking about the different nutrition conference, the different research conferences. People are talking about leaky gut, digestive tract integrity. People are talking about liver health. We're able to help there. So what can we do at Agrarian Solutions to stay on the cutting edge of technologies coming along to defend and protect the animal, and then put all of them together so that you get the synergistic benefit? Not doing just one thing, but putting all of them together.
Yeah, I think it's incredible. Larry, if there was, as you like to call it, the back of the napkin takeaway for folks to just kind of think about today, what would that be?
Digestive tract integrity is extremely important. And with DTX, you've now got digestive tract integrity support, epithelial cells, tight junctions. You've also got antioxidant support for the liver. Defend and protect the digestive tract, defend and protect the liver.
Wow. I can't say it enough. I think this is a step in the right direction. I mean, if you hear people out in the industry talking about essential oils, talking about plant extracts, honestly, the industry has moved beyond that. This is kind of the next frontier of looking at plant extracts, if you would, and diving into the molecular level. And as Larry said, isolating those plant actives to be able to do what they're supposed to do without all the fluff, And
Exactly.
So give you guys a lot of credit. And thank you, Larry, for coming on today to give us dive into the research behind the LivOx and the decision to, keep making the best better.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate the opportunity.
Once again, everybody, thank you for tuning in to Ruminate This with Agrarian Solutions. And you will find that presentation and the research articles in our show notes. Again, you can email us podcast@agrsol.com, and we can go over them with you, send them to you. We can set up a time to go over them with you individually if we need to, and bring everybody on board with what we're trying to accomplish with DTX and the LivOx enhancement. So thank you, and we'll be talking to everybody next week. If you found value in today's podcast, please hit subscribe and share. And we look forward to talking to you again next week.